Welcome everybody to Harry Matters 5. After a brief hiatus, we're back to discuss an exciting new study that we voted to fund. I think just as of last week. Just to give a little bit of background on the study before we get into it, Herbert, originally an anon in our community, started proposing the idea of a delivery vehicle and how beneficial it could be, not just to current treatments, but to any potential treatments we found down the line. He increasingly started posting more and more research into our Discord server. It picked up steam with the community, and up until the point where we eventually actually designed sort of a study design, interviewed, I think somewhere around 25 different delivery vehicle researchers, to see if they would be willing to run the study. And we ultimately settled on Professor Tais Gratieri here, who is a total expert in the field. Just for some background on her, she's a professor of pharmaceutical science at the University of Brazil, has over 100 publications as an author or a co-author in the field of dermal delivery across 20 years. Without further ado, I guess I'll kick it off and give it to Professor Gratieri to just talk a bit about sort of her experience, her background in the field, and why she's excited to pursue this study with us.
Hello. Well, thanks for the nice introduction, Andrew. Hello, Andrew, the other Andrew. And, a big hello to the whole community. Well, indeed, we're very excited about this study because that's something we wanted to do for a long time, to have this organized comparison with different vehicles and the same situation. Well, surely we'll get through this and explain in details what we're going to do, but that's something we always wanted to set up. But normally, in the normally funded projects, we can't do this type of studies because we have to focus on like one vehicle, one drug, and then we have to complete the study, and then we have another problem, another gap to fill in, and then we have to complete the other type of study. So these large comparison using different vehicles and so on, that's something we always had an interest in on, but it's hard to set up.
Definitely. And I think just for reference and to give the reader a bit of context, or the listener a bit of context. So the current plan that we're working with, we've selected the drug Dutasteride. We're going to test a broad range of delivery vehicles on the porcine or pig's ear model. And ideally, what we're looking for is we're trying to have as follicle-specific delivery as possible, so the drug really stays localized in the follicle, but then also sort of with enhanced penetrative properties, because a big problem with a lot of topical dutasterides out on the market today is essentially that they either don't penetrate the skin, or they use such a high dosage that instead of sort of permeating sort of specifically to the hair follicles, it kind of permeates all throughout the skin, gets absorbed systemically, and ultimately causes the same side effects that would have occurred if you just taken the oral, the pill itself. And so, what's the point of that? So as we kind of go further into this study, I just think it's important to say that what we're really striving for is limiting of side effects more than increasing efficacy, because if you really just wanted to maximize efficacy, it would be as simple as just taking the pill. So that's what we're really looking for. I mean, perhaps maybe first we could talk a little bit more about like why Dutasteride. And Bax, I don't know if you want to chime in here on this at all, or
Yeah, I mean, Dutasteride the best hair loss drug on the market today, right? It inhibits both isoforms of 5-alpha reductase inhibitors, 5-HR1 and 5-HR2. Finasteride only inhibits one, so Dutasteride will drop your DHT if taken systemically by at least 90%, finasteride more so by at least 60%. So we're getting a much stronger clinical effect with Dutasteride than finasteride. So it's the best drug on the market, and like you're saying, it just comes down to, can we limit the side effects? Because unfortunately, when you drop your DHT by that much, you can experience a wide array of side effects, from sexual health, mental health, brain health, potentially kidney health. So yeah, really excited to personally to use it and to hopefully get something that I can put on my head and doesn't mess with any other parts of my body.
Yeah, indeed. Dutasteride is a really good model molecule. It's not a model molecule, it's a drug already used, but it's the right drug to do this type of study because you do have all this efficacy proven and it's very potent. And that is the first thing. Because, well, when we're talking about targeting drug delivery, well, I skipped talking about our expertise and stuff like that, but targeting, getting the drug there is really the focus of our research for a long time. And it's not like we don't work with the basics and the explaining the phenomenon, but you say to me, oh, okay, that's the molecule, here's the molecule, it has some efficacy, and here's where I want it needs to go. So we get to put the drug there. And getting the drug there, it's not so trivial as one might think. I mean, the skin's right there, just put the drug there, it will go there, why not? Well, then it comes the real challenge, because we have the skin, our skin is a really good barrier for drug entrance. I mean, if we think of the purpose of the skin is to keep the water inside the body. The main purpose of skin is to keep water inside. So if it needs to keep water inside, it immediately blocks everything from outside to entering. It is a very efficient barrier. And then we have this very efficient barrier at the outmost surface of the skin, which is the stratum corneum. You have dead cells. Many people think, well, you have many dead cells, large protein content, and people may think that's the main barrier, that's the protein and the dead cells, but actually it's this layer covering these dead cells, which is the lipid content, that it's beneath and within the dead cells, and that's the lipid matrix. And then that's a really good barrier for it prevents water from going outside, but it prevents any molecules from entering the skin. So, well, it's a good barrier. So when you want to cross that topically, you can get all types of formulations. For example, the minoxidil formulation, which we have topical, it has a huge amount of propylene glycol, which interacts with the stratum corneum somehow and enhances drug penetration. So you enhance drug penetration, you have the effect, but then you have all the side effects. You're enhancing it and you have a lot of drug penetrating and you have all the side effects. So the real gold deal, what we wanted for a hair follicle was to target the hair follicle. So we want the drug to accumulate in the hair follicle, and to act within this region of the hair follicle, all these microvessels and all the regions within the hair follicles, the bulge, the dermal papillae, all the regions, but with not producing systemic side effects. So how do we enhance drug delivery? We get it there, but not so much as the side effect is initiated. So nanoparticles are very good models, vehicles for this. The first thing we'll try to evaluate is different types of nanoparticles or even microparticles, because they have a natural tendency to accumulate within the hair follicle, in the follicle cast. And the idea is, if we have these nanoparticles and nanostructures and microstructures accumulated in the hair follicle, then we can control release and have small amounts of drug released, small amounts enough to have the topical, the local effect. But when the drug will be in the systemic circulation, because it will be there's no way to restrain. Okay, we will restrain. That's not the thing. The thing is to control the dose, so that the dose that will get in the systemic circulation will be so small that it's not enough to trigger the side effects. So playing with the vehicles, we can do that. And that's the beauty of the drug delivery. I mean, you're not changing the molecule. The molecule is there. It's characterized. It has the effects. But you can play with it. So you have the optimus release, and you can control. And so control is the word we're looking for here.
Right. No. And I think one thing that's important that is probably less known about dutasteride, but what we are really trying to sort of leverage with this study. So currently our plan is to use 0.025% concentrations, which is equivalent to like 0.25 milligrams, which is less than sort of the 0.5 milligrams that's typically prescribed for dutasteride. Then you take into account the fact that a lot of that 0.25% is actually not going to get through the skin barrier. And so ideally, what we'll be doing with the vehicles is sort of increasing the penetration of the dutasteride that is there. But then when it actually gets down to the hair bulb, it'll be a much lower sort of concentration or amount of dutasteride, if you will. And I think one of the things that I really need to give Herbert credit for, what he looked into, which is really not as well known about dutasteride, is that there is there's sort of a dose-dependent half-life with dutasteride on how quickly it clears from the body. And so while the threshold is kind of unknown, and I think we have a graphic which we can pull up on the screen hopefully for this, but while the threshold is unknown, dutasteride can clear from the body actually very quickly below a certain dosage. But then once you start getting, to the higher dosages of dutasteride, like a lot of those sort of more mainstream topical dutasterides and finasterides on the market do, you have the half-life sort of extending out to like 20 days, a month, and that's when the side effect profile really gets bad. I might just mention, and because I find this kind of interesting, and Professor Gratieri, you'll have maybe more color on this, but so the two big hurdles that we're trying to overcome as well from a penetration standpoint with dutasteride is, one, it has a very large molecular size, so it's 528.53 grams per mole.
I wouldn't say that's so large.
Not too large? Okay,
No,
fair enough.
no. For penetration purposes, I wouldn't say that's very large. Until 1,000 or 800, I mean, we don't consider it for being a large molecule. Large would be like protein, more than 1,000. Size-wise, it's okay.
And so then, I guess, to follow up on that, because I know there's been some topical dutasteride has had a bit harder of a time penetrating the skin than finasteride. I know it's highly lipophilic. Some have said that it might be so lipophilic that it's sort of outside of the Goldilocks zone, which prevents penetration, because typically like a bit of lipophilicity would be good for penetration. Could you maybe like help us think about that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And it's very lipophilic. And the problem...
Sorry, just to explain, guys, lipophilic means that it loves fats, right? So the lipids that you were describing in our skin before, it means that it's attracted to those and becomes absorbed.
Yeah, and it's a very important parameter when we're talking about drug delivery, because, well, the way, for that we have to think the way the drug leaves the formulation and penetrates and diffuses through the skin and through all layers to get to the target point. And that's really dependent on this lipophilicity, hydrophilicity, and the way the medium the drug prefers to partition. I mean, when the drug is very lipophilic, if you have a formulation that is oily, well, the drug has first step to leave the formulation towards the skin, and while you have a force driving this, that is the concentration range, the thermodynamic activity, and then the higher the concentration, the drug tends to diffuse for a region with a lower concentration. So it goes from higher concentration to lower concentration. But if the drug is very, very lipophilic. It likes fat. And then the stratum corneum has this lipid matrix, which is fat around those dead cells. So the problem is much of dutasteride gets retained in the stratum corneum and doesn't penetrate further, because then the epithelium is kind of more hydrophilic, and then it's hydrophilic, it's lipophilic, likes the stratum corneum, stays there. And then this it's hard to get the penetration in the target site near the hair follicles and so on. Well, for this you can use carriers. And then what I'm saying, like, size is not so much relevant here, because we're thinking of targeting the hair follicles. And the hair follicle shaft, well, it has this opening towards the skin in this infundibular area that is about some micrometers. So it has large opening. And in this large opening, we can put on nanoparticles or even microparticles, which are much, much higher than the size of the molecule. I mean, in one nanoparticle, we'll have millions of molecules. So it's not the problem of the size, but of these affinities and how the drug will partition from the formulation towards the skin and towards the target. So an interesting comparison with finasteride is, well, we have a previous work done with iron nanoparticles where we compared finasteride and dutasteride in the same nanoparticles. And you see, this study was particularly interesting because we could quantify the amount of nanoparticles penetrated the hair follicles, and not just the drug, because what we normally do is, well, okay, we have the drug in a vehicle, and then we quantify how much of the drug are in the different structures of the skin and the different areas. But this study, we did both. We quantified the drug and the nanoparticles. So we could compare, for example, a blank nanoparticle and an iron nanoparticle that didn't have any drug, finasteride nor dutasteride, and we could see how when we inserted the drug in the system, properties changed. So that's I don't know if I'm getting confused here, but that's not a very good news for Herbert, because there's no point in evaluating one vehicle and then saying it could be a potential vehicle for other drugs, because the way this vehicle will interact with the skin and with the hair follicle is very specific for the drug it's in company. Because just so you have an idea, when we had the dutasteride in these particles, we have more than double of the particles retained in the stratum corneum compared to the blank particles or compared to the finasteride particles. And when we have dutasteride in these particles, we have almost 4 times the amount of the particles in the hair follicles compared to the blank nanoparticles, particles without the drug. So this lipophilic aspect of dutasteride was good for targeting the hair follicle. And it was different from finasteride, that is more hydrophilic, and finasteride actually hampered the targeting effect in the hair follicle. So for this type of particles, at least, dutasteride was a much more promising drug for hair follicular targeting. So we had this previous data. And, well, that gives us really good hopes that we can have a very good vehicle for targeting dutasteride that is a very lipophilic drug. And then we can have this targeting. And once we have this targeting, I mean, the dose is not so important right now, because then we can, if we have the target, I mean, as much as nanoparticles or system or drug in the hair follicle as possible, then we can just lower the dose so that we don't have the side effects triggered. So the thing is to find out what would be the best vehicle to really target and not get the drug going elsewhere. So then we can play with the dose and diminish it and prevent from having side effects. So that's what we're looking at. These of pausing the concentration, I mean, okay, we'll work, all the studies will do it 0.025%. That's okay. Because when we're doing comparisons experiments, we need to vary only one parameter. So we can't have multiple parameters varying, so we can't make comparisons. So that's the point.
I guess, and I don't want to put words in Herbert's mouth because he's definitely very knowledgeable about it. But I think what's at least really important about what we're doing here is that we're creating the systems by which we can test follicular delivery for certain drugs, because I think even no matter if we develop like an siRNA or an antibody or just another small molecule, delivery for topical delivery is always going to be a big issue that sort of hair loss treatments face. I mean, a terminal hair follicle is almost about 4,000 nanometers beneath the I always get mixed up on the units, but I think 4,000 nanometers beneath the skin. And then as it miniaturizes, the dermal papilla sort of comes up and rises towards the surface of the skin. But obviously we want to sort of be able to target those terminal hair follicles when they're deepest in the skin, which is always going to be a bit difficult to sort of find this, you can get that deep into the skin, but then you're also not being absorbed by the surrounding vasculature, which is like highly prevalent sort of around the bulb of these hair follicles. I think this might be a cool opportunity then for us to pivot, did you have something to say, Professor?
Well, we'll get to the inner vasculature. We'll get there because there's no way to prevent it. But the thing is to control. We may have even some vehicle that accumulates the drug in the infundibular area, so very much on the surface, and then the system is there, but the drug is slowly released. And that's another possibility. So we don't have to get the whole system, the nano system or the formulation deep inside. But maybe we need to accumulate the system in a target way, so it's not everywhere, and to control the release so that the release is controlled. And so we can afford to have like once in a day application. That would be ideal, when you apply the formulation once a day, and then you have the action through the day without eliciting the side effects.
Is that slow release that you're talking about, where the drug kind of comes out of the nanoparticles and trickles down? Is that the reservoir effect?
Yeah, that can be a reservoir effect you can control. But in some cases, it might be interesting to have fast drug release if you have very targeted release. So that's not definite. I mean, we can have a system working very well, controlling release, okay? So it's targeting the hair follicle and it's controlling. Or you can have very fast release, but it's targeting the hair follicle. So you can also control the dose. So it depends on the vehicle, on the drug, and this we have to study. And what I was going to say is that the knowledge of what influences hair follicle deposition is so controversial. I mean, data in the literature is so controversial. We don't know. For example, it's established, and we have lots of papers saying that, okay, ideally we have nanoparticles around 600 nanometers targeting hair follicle. Okay, we have a large piece of evidence right now with this size and so on, but we have a study going on with some partners from Germany, Professor Mark Schneider from Germany, and we were evaluating different types of nanoparticles, gelatin nanoparticles with different sizes. And the thing is that we are suspecting, I mean, that's unpublished data, okay? I'm giving a huge spoiler here, but we're suspecting that other factors rather than size would matter. One of them would be the elasticity of the vesicle. And that's something we want to evaluate for the dutasteride delivery in this study right now, because we're thinking of evaluating liposomes. And one thing we'll try is to try different vesicles with different elasticity properties to see how they would influence. I mean, that's still it's a basic and applied research, because we don't know yet. We have few information. I mean, we can say size is something that matters, but maybe this density, and I don't know, iron nanoparticles is more dense, so they go further deep than liposomes that are like lipophilic nanoparticles. We don't know. And one thing that makes us not knowing, and which makes it so hard to compare to results, is that every single group is studying with a different protocol. So I was trying to compare, for just so you have an idea. I was trying to say, okay, so I have this study, previous studies with iron nanoparticles with dutasteride, and we have some lipid nanocapsules also with dutasteride. So which one of both were better for targeting dutasteride? I did the studies, and I can't tell, because the protocols were different from both studies. So I can't really tell. And imagine, this was done in my own lab with almost the same people involved, but we used different time for the experiment. One experiment did for 12 hours, the other one did for 6 and 12. But one we evaluated the influence of massage, and the other one no. So I don't know. And this happens for every study in the literature. So I want to say, okay, what would be good for targeting dutasteride to the hair follicles? I have some studies published, so why don't I get the answers? Because we don't have a large study done comparing the vehicles using the same protocols and the same skin model and the same drug concentration. You have to use the same for everything and vary only one parameter.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something great about, hopefully, when we open source our study protocol, anyone in the world, right, could copy what we're doing, by each parameter. That could be really exciting. I also think, Professor Gratieri, this is a great opportunity to maybe get into specifically like the study design, like the most important elements to you. I'm sure you know, but of significant debate was what model we should use, like what skin model we should use. Obviously, we ended up choosing the Porcine ear model, but there was a lot of debate about that. So maybe if you could start there and then get into any other details that you think are relevant.
Yeah, I know about the debate, and I've watched all the episodes of Harry Matters podcast, and I know Professor Ross was like keen on defending the scalp model and so on. But the thing is, again, this study, we want to know which would be the best vehicle to get dutasteride in the hair follicle selectively, without and selectively preventing the side effects. So for this, we have to evaluate the different vehicles, and we can't vary the barrier and the model. Well, then we need a constant model for this comparison. And well, of course, the ultimate model would be humans. So if we could do this study in humans clinically, okay, that would be the gold standard. But well, we can't, obviously. And we have to have some screening first, and to screen for the best probable formulation. So one idea was to use the human skin. So you can debate, well, okay, we have to screen, so why not use human skin in vitro? And human skin is not a good model for in vitro experiments targeting hair follicle. Porcine skin is a better model than human skin to simulate human skin. That's really strange, but the thing is, human skin, once you have it, it contracts the muscles beneath the skin, and even the muscles, the hair follicle, it contracts. So you don't have that follicular opening anymore that you normally would have. So the follicular openings are like 90% reduced. And then there's a very good study with a group from Germany from 2020. I can get the reference now, the researcher in charge is Patzelt in 2020, and they did the whole morphometrics characteristics of the pig ear skin hair follicle, which the size and the diameter of the entrance of the follicle in the infundibular area, the length of the follicle, the density, everything. And the percentages of hair follicles in anagen phase and in telogen phase. And they concluded that the ear porcine skin model really resembles human skin.
Yeah.
So it's a very good model for skin permeation when looking at the hair follicle concentration. And okay, all the other advantages. It's easy to obtain. We can have large amounts of porcine pig ears. I mean, easy in terms. It's not so. It wouldn't be easy for industry, for example, because you have to collect the ears immediately after the animal is slaughtered, and before it goes to some scalding process. So it's not that we go there and we shop for pig ears. You have to have agreement with the abattoir, so you get the ears removed before the scalding process, so the skin barrier is preserved. So it's not so trivial. I mean, we say it's easy, but well, it's easier comparison to obtaining human skin, because nothing is easy in research. I mean, it's easier. It's not easy, but well, we can get the porcine ears, and the variability between individuals is not so large. And the variabilities between the hair follicles and how they're distributed is not so large, so we can have low variations from one experiment to the other, and then we get to the point that there we can compare things, and that's a good model. It's different than a very important point to clarify is that we can't know from these studies how much dutasteride will be there. And okay, like for example, we have 1.01%. So okay, so this won't trigger the side effects. I mean, that's not what this study is doing. We can't know the precise amount that will be there because we can't simulate the in vivo conditions. I mean, there are no circulations and there are no dynamic events. You don't have protein enzymatic reactions and so on. So we're not estimating how much will be there. We're just comparing formulations. I mean, I get that formulation A will be more efficient in targeting hair follicle than formulation B. So that in vitro model, then I can translate that this will be the same for the in vivo for the humans clinically, that there's large amount of evidence in the literature proving that we can do this relation to say that one formulation can be better than the other one in targeting a determined region. But I cannot relate of the amounts I will obtain that will be around the same amounts that I will obtain in vivo. We're not saying we're going to do that because that's not possible. And in that point, I agree with Professor Ross that I can't know that. But, well, I don't need to know that right now. That's not the point.
No, I think absolutely. And I think that's what ultimately at least steered me towards the porcine ear model was really like, as you said, there's so little sort of comparative information around where you've used a standardized protocol on different delivery vehicles. Obviously, scalp skin is great, but it's really hard to come by. So it's much easier to test a broader range of vehicles on standardized pig's ear. And then, you know, for listeners, Ralph's argument was essentially, and I don't want to misquote him here either, but it's essentially, you know, there's different thickness with the pig skin, and then also there's just far more follicular openings on human scalp skin than there would be on a pig's ear, and so that you're accounting for some difference there. If you were going to do the ideal model, maybe you could use like a tensile testing machine to kind of like stretch out the skin a little bit to counteract the change in tension when you actually remove the scalp skin from the body. And at least my general impression is that while, you know, when you're testing sort of like various biomarkers to see if you're prolonging the anagen phase of the hair follicle with different small molecules and stuff like that, the human scalp skin, either microdissected hair follicle model or the human scalp skin model, probably still remains best in class. But when you're really looking at sort of like the mechanical properties of the skin and delivery, and you're doing it and you want to test on a broad scale, the porcine ear model, at least for our purposes of developing a treatment where we're using delivery vehicles, which we know work, and we're using a drug, which we already know is effective. So really what's most important is getting a comparative understanding of like the mechanical functions of how this delivery is happening.
Yeah, but even this stretching, I don't know, for comparing vehicles, well, when I did my postdoc in Geneva, University of Geneva, for 2 years, and working with Professor Yogesh Vakalia. He's he's a huge expert in skin delivery, and we used to work there with iontophoresis, which is a physical method to enhance drug delivery and even large molecules, and so on. And for some time, every experiment we made, we have all these screenings using porcine ears, and then at the end, we had one experiment like using human skin, and just to compare and say, okay, this validates our porcine results, and it always validated it, always 100% of the time. And then for some time we did this at the end to compare with the human skin, also in Germany, but then we end up not doing that anymore because there was no point. Okay, literature now has established the porcine ear skin model is a very good model to resemble the human skin. So when it's in vitro, I wouldn't see the point of developing this new model for human scalp just to compare formulations. I mean, unless you want to maintain some enzymatic activity, some immune cell activity, and you're looking for activity, and then, okay, the cells, the immune cells, the systems might be different, and then I won't argue. But for drug delivery purposes, I don't see why to use a different model.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really about dividing, right? Separating, delivering the vehicle, and then the active effect from the drug inside of the vehicle, right? Like almost establishing two separate models, and that is the path we're currently heading on as an organization, right? Is one model for testing delivery and another model for actually testing the clinical effect of the drug.
So maybe with that, because I think that was an excellent overview. I love how controversial pig's ear or human scalp skin model can get in the research field. Now maybe we move on to the vehicles that we're actually planning to test right now. I think the first thing to start with, and the first thing to say, I think, which is super unique about our study, I believe Professor Gratieri is going to be formulating about 3 vehicles herself, and then we're actually receiving submissions from Cage Bio, who's loading their ionic liquid formulation with Dutasteride, and then Xylo Therapeutics, who their Z pods, which I believe are amorphous silica particles, and they'll be loading those with Dutasteride. We'll be testing those and sort of doing a broad overview comparison, and ultimately open sourcing all the data, because at the end of the day, you know, we want to develop a treatment, obviously, but we also want to make sure that we're not sort of shielding our community members from what may actually be the best in class treatment. So the first thing, and we've spoken about this briefly, but just on particle size, the particles that we're testing. So I know there's sort of this ratchet effect with nanoparticles, and maybe you can speak about that a bit, Professor Gratieri, but it's essentially where the hair follicles, like natural oscillating movements against the follicular walls, pushes these nanoparticles further down the follicle. And if the follicle is like below 100 nanometers, it won't, in size, it won't actually get picked up by that ratchet effect and get pushed further down the follicle. And if it's too big, it will similarly sort of get like jammed and not actually get pushed all the way down. So before we go into the sort of trade-offs with each of the vehicles we're currently planning to test, it might be interesting just to get your perspective on size and how it factors into the ratchet effect.
Yeah, that's very interesting. This ratchet effect was described by Professor Lademann in Germany, and how to explain why these nanovehicles would preferably stay in the hair follicles when we do the comparison. Because, and then how to estimate this? We came up with this hair follicular targeting factor, because what we saw was one thing is to say that a formulation enhances hair follicular accumulation. That was one thing, but the other thing is how it really targets, because, well, going back to that Dutasteride lipid nanocarriers, what we see is when we have, for example, a low coating outside of the nanoparticles, we could get more in the hair follicular, but we could also get more in the skin. So the targeting was not affected, but without the coating, we could get more in the hair follicle and not the skin. So we could get really targeting. So that's the first concept, that we can differentiate the targeting from the enhancing in the hair follicle. Well, and this ratchet effect has been observed because why nanoparticles tend to be more in the hair follicular targeting than in the other skin areas. And they came up with this assumption that was the movement of the hair shaft itself that was pushing down the nanoparticles of a determined size. And now, working on that, we're trying to evaluate different characteristics of the nanoparticles that would contribute to that. And as I gave the spoiler, one could be the elasticity and the rigidity of the vesicle and so on. And we have a large piece of evidence corroborating this ratchet effect hypothesis, because, for example, we had one experiment where we produced effervescent granulus containing minoxidil. And then we got creative there and we had this formulation. We envisioned it would be okay. So it has a powder, you apply the powder, and then when you get a little bit wet, it's effervescent, and then this movement will target the hair follicle. And it did happen. It did target the hair follicular more, and one explanation was that this effervescent movement was helping the drug to go inside the hair follicle. And, well, that's a piece of evidence. And also, when we have a massage, so a massage is something we're thinking of applying a parameter of we're planning on adding on our design protocol to evaluate, because when we apply the formulation and then, for example, some time of massage, 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, I mean, we need to decide on that, the time we apply the massage. But with this in vitro experiments, we apply this circular massage with one finger to the area we're evaluating. And when we apply this massage, we have seen targeting to the hair follicles for several vehicles. And so that's something important to evaluate, because then you can have a right, straightforward way of application to the users. Okay, you apply this. If you want a better action, you need to massage for some time. This way you target the hair follicles. And then this massage, really, we have a large piece of evidence in the literature as well, showing that, and that is interesting because we get creative in our studies often. We did one study, we wanted to target clobetasol for the hair follicles to treat alopecia areata, which is autoimmune disease. And we also have clobetasol is a very potent molecule, so you need only few amounts of the drug to have effect, but you have several side effects if you have more. So we evaluated many sophisticated things to enhance targeted drug delivery. We evaluated, okay, so let's use some magnetic particles that will heat up, and then this heat will make it go further through the hair follicles. We evaluated iontophoresis. Okay, we applied electric current so we can drive the particles in the hair follicles. We evaluated ultrasound. We evaluated many sophisticated technologies. And then as a control, we evaluated the finger massage. And the finger massage was the best in targeting the nanoparticles to the hair follicles. So we had a very sophisticated design study. And in the end, well, the massage was as good as all the others.
That's funny. Sometimes it's the simple solutions, I guess.
Yeah, and that's what we hope for the Dutasteride. I mean, we're evaluating many different vehicles, but we also hope that we can have a simple solution. I mean, may I start with the spoilers about the study?
Yeah.
One thing we thought, I mean, come on, we have liposomes being sold and this compounding pharmacies, they're blank liposomes. What if we just mix dutasteride? I mean, doctors are prescribing dutasteride mixed with these liposomes in the off-label use. And let's evaluate. Is it maybe a good thing for targeting dutasteride? I mean, that's so simple. It's already out there. And, well, it can be prescribed off-label, and if we see it really targets dutasteride. I mean, why to develop a very sophisticated nanoparticles loaded, covered with I don't know what. If we have a simple solution, I mean, let's look into it.
Yeah, maybe that's a cool way to pivot into sort of, I believe the three vehicles that we were talking about formulating at your lab was some sort of liposomal formulation, a nanoemulsion, and then potentially like a PLGA nanoparticle. So perhaps we could just talk a little bit about the trade-offs of each, and maybe like what you're expecting, which formulation I think if you were a betting woman, like what you would place your money on to perform best, or yeah.
I don't have that answer. I can't foresee the results before they're finalized. But well, we can expect. We designed the study expecting that these lipophilic nanoparticles would have a good performance. I believe liposomes will be very good formulations for delivering dutasteride. But well, we can see. I have good hopes, but there might be some problems as well. I mean, we're visioning because, well, liposomes, we have this bilayer lipid, spherical bilayer lipids with an aqueous nucleus. It could be with ethanol in the nucleus. We could have etosomes as well, and so on. But let's keep simple. And then dutasteride, we hope it will be in this lipid bilayer. So, but the thing is, will the encapsulation efficiency be sufficient to have high loading doses of dutasteride in the system so the whole vehicle is efficient? I mean, that's some things we have to evaluate. And chances are, when we formulate, we make the formulation with the dutasteride. I mean, we're going to develop the vehicle with the dutasteride. Chances are encapsulation is better than just taking commercial liposomes, blank liposomes already formed, and just mixing things. I mean, yeah. I mean, it would be ideal to have this mixing. Okay, it's already formed. Let's mix and see the efficacy. But sometimes it's not the case, and then the efficiency of encapsulation will be a problem. Well, not a problem. Will be a challenge. But well, then we can evaluate different strategies, making the vesicle more rigid or less rigid, and how this will affect the loading dose, and afterwards how will this affect the targeting to the hair follicles. So there are many aspects that need to be evaluated. But just about the liposomes, they were also chosen because they're stable. I mean, in some they can be very stable formulations and commercialized. We have several examples in the market of commercialized liposomes with different drugs, so it can be done. It's feasible. Uh, let's see if we find a good formulation for it, and then we have to compare with others, because maybe we have this silico, maybe they're more dense than the liposomes and they target more the hair follicles. I don't know, I'm very curious to see the results of this study.
And Professor, when you talk about elasticity, can liposomes have different elasticity, like can we have different liposome designs, or are we looking more so at
Yes.
so okay, fascinating. Yeah,
Yes.
and can it vary widely?
Yeah,
So like,
it depends on the formulation. Sometimes, for example, you have cholesterol in the formulation of the liposomes. It's between the phospholipids, and then it makes the vesicle more rigid, and it prevents drugs from going out. Simply saying. But the cholesterol can compete with the drug for this lipophilic space. And maybe that will be the case for the Dutasteride. So we have to evaluate, but that's indicative. And if we make them more elastic, we can just insert like some edge activators, some small surfactants in the formulations that will make the vesicle more elastic. Some authors even call these super elastic liposomes like elastosomes, and you can see these different names in the literature when you have some different formulations. I mean, we'll have to evaluate. There's no study comparing these things and showing if these super elastic vesicles will have this ricochet effect in the hair follicles. We don't know that yet, so that's why we're very looking forward to this study.
yeah, definitely.
And is when you say elastic, is that the same as when people talk about like hard and soft delivery vehicles, or are those different concepts?
Yeah, more or less. It's elastic opposed to viscous. When you say about the material behavior, you have viscous behaviors like solid behavior, and elastic behaviors like more fluid behavior. It's in this sense.
So yeah, Professor Gratieri, can you just talk a little bit outside of sort of the pig's ear and applying the actual formulations? Can you just talk a bit on the study and the work that you do before that even happens to gauge actually how much of the API, the dutasteride in this case, is being absorbed by the delivery vehicles?
Okay, so when formulating the drug delivery vehicle, we can have different parameters, but once we establish a drug concentration and we have the vehicle formed, we have to know how much of the drug we applied is actually inside the vehicle, because there is an equilibrium. Well, this part of the drug may be in the medium outside of the vehicle if it's a nanoparticle, for example. And for this, we can do two ways. We can either have this nano systems filtered, and then, we know how much of the drug we applied, and then we filter everything. The nano is retained in the filter, and then we quantify how much is in the filtered part, and then we know by the difference what was in there first and what was in the filtered. We know how much is in the system. Or when we have some drugs that might interact with this filter material, which is the case of the Dutasteride for some filters, we can also centrifuge the nanosystems, then applying huge forces, because nano, you have to have like huge G forces to actually centrifuge all the nanosystem, because the gravity does not apply very well to nanosystems, so you have to have really huge G forces, and then the particle centrifuge, and you get the supernatant, and you see how much of the free drug is in the supernatant, and then the difference is of course inside the material.
Very interesting. Yeah, so it's more complicated than just throwing a bunch of chemicals in a jar and seeing what happens.
Oh, definitely.
One thing that's cool about that is like, and also about just working with you in general, is how like frankly, just how knowledgeable you are about all the different parameters that we can tweak to really make this work. Because like, yeah, for instance, like I don't think that you need a lot of expertise to manage all the different parameters at the same time. And yeah, so really excited to be working with you on this.
Oh, thank you. It's very different. Yeah, because people think, okay, you just mix it there. I have this vehicle, just put my drug there and let's see. But it's very different.
Yeah.
How the drug is interacting with the system and how the whole system with the drug will interact with the hair follicle and the skin. And that's something to be, and to see these differences and how one thing would affect the behavior, you have to be very careful with varying only one parameter at a time so you can compare things. Otherwise, it's like that. You have the studies and you can conclude or compare anything with the different studies. So that's why.
Well, Baxter or Professor Gratieri, did you guys have anything else you wanted to say? Because I think that wraps up with all the content that we wanted to get through.
Well, I'm very excited to starting this. I think it was so nice that this whole community-driven studies, because you can go to the point that it will interest the individual and not like the industry, and because maybe industry gets to a formulation that okay, this is working for 90% of people and it has side effects for 10%, so I don't care, I'm selling it, it's good enough, 9% is good enough. But what if you're in the 10% that is getting the side effects? Come on, you want a solution, right?
Yeah. And
please care about me.
Yeah,
and then
I mean, and because so many people have hair loss, and because so many people have hair loss, 10% is actually quite a large number. Like hundreds of millions of people. So.
And even if you don't get the immediate side effects, there's increasing sort of research coming out that there might be longer term effects.
Yeah.
So it's like, if I personally had the option to just say, okay, I want this dutasteride to be effective, but only on my hair follicles, not in my entire body. I mean, it personally appeals, massively to me. Thank you so much, Professor Gratieri, for spending the time with us. I guess what I'll just say as we close off, we have 5 of the 10 total slots filled for this delivery vehicle. We're accepting external submissions. So if you're a delivery vehicle researcher or know of a cool delivery vehicle that you'd like to be included in this comparison study, please join our Discord. Reach out to us. I'm averbs123. Bax is Andy1 in the Discord. Professor Gratieri is not in our Discord yet, but we'll relay the information to her. And the plan now is the study in total will take 2 years. But we will be releasing the data incrementally as we test each delivery vehicle. So there could actually be data and even formulations, within months. Professor Gratieri, I don't know, what's the timeline? Yeah,
well, my timeline for first results like 6 months. I mean, I think it's, yeah.
Yeah.
The next so 6 months, you can hope to have some news from our part.
Yes. So we'll have some news, potential formulation within 6 months, and then after that, we'll incrementally keep releasing sort of our results, so that a lot of people in hair loss, it's like they keep everything private. You don't hear from them for 5 years, so that's not going to be the case with us. With that said, this has been episode 5 of the Hairy Matters podcast. To try the influencer thing out, please like and subscribe. It'll help the YouTube algorithm. It'll boost this video, get us more views, all of that stuff. And yeah, if you're interested in helping out or joining the mission, the best way to do so is to hop in our Discord community and just start chatting it up with us. We'll include the Discord invite link in the description of this video as well. With that, thank you so much, and it's been great speaking with you, Professor Gratieri.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye, guys.